українська. І тоді вже на цій мові так і будете залишатися. Добре? І зараз я передаю слово професору Йоганну Ердеману, який є одним з співголів цієї групи святого Іринея, який є одним зі співавторів документу, який ми сьогодні розглядаємо. Він нас познайомить, трошки введе в курс діяльності цієї групи, яка є дуже цікавою з одного боку, з іншого боку вона є досить невідомою в Україні, для чого, власне, наш семінар є присвячений. І нашою ціллю є популяризувати ті наукові гарні досягнення, які ця група має. Будь ласка, професоре Йоганне Ердеман, я даю вам слово.
Thank you, Taras, for the warm welcome. Dear colleagues and friends in Lviv, from all Ukraine and other places where you follow this online conference. In my short introduction, I would like to introduce you into the work of the St. Irenaeus Joint Orthodox Catholic Working Group, which was founded in Paderborn in 2004, where I am working at the Johann Adam Möller Institute since 2001. The St. Irenaeus Joint Orthodox Catholic Working Group is an unofficial working group of 26 theologians, 13 Orthodox and 13 Catholics from 16 different countries. Argentina, Austria, Bulgaria, France, Germany, Great Britain, Greece, Italy, Lebanon, Malta, the Netherlands, Romania, Russia, Serbia, Ukraine, and the United States of America. If I'm allowed to share my screen, I could show you a list of members which might be interesting. So I will try to do this right now. Let's see whether it works. Hopefully you will now see my screen. Okay. And let's continue to the next. So you have here the list and the names of members. You can see who is a member and from which countries they come. The Irenaeus group was founded at a time when the official Catholic Orthodox dialogue was experiencing serious difficulties. I would like to only recall the 8th plenary session of the International Commission for Theological Dialogue between the Roman Catholic and the Orthodox churches in July 2000 in Baltimore, where the commission discussed uniatism and proselytism again. According to Cardinal Walter Kasper, this meeting led to a fiasco and the de facto failure of the dialogue. The commission dispersed without agreeing on any further procedure, and the future of the Orthodox Catholic dialogue was uncertain at best. Against this background, 6 Catholic theologians, myself included, met in March 2003 in Paderborn in Germany at the invitation of the Johann Adam Möller Institute for Ecumenics to consider together how the theological dialogue between Orthodox and Catholics could be given a new impetus. In the course of our discussion, a proposal was put forward to establish a continuing working group of Orthodox and Catholic theologians as a dialogue forum on a pan-Orthodox level, which could discuss existing theological problems as well as general hermeneutical questions. The hope was expressed that a permanent working group of this kind could develop into a body that could also tackle the difficult issues in the Orthodox Catholic dialogue as the members became increasingly familiar with one another. In 2003, the initiators were able to secure the agreement of Serbian Bishop Ignatije Midic of Braničevo and the then auxiliary bishop of Magdeburg, Dr. Gerhard Feige, to serve as co-presidents of the proposed working group. In close consultation with these 2 moderators, 24 theologians were invited to the constitutive session of the working group, which took place in Paderborn in June 2004. At the end of the Paderborn meeting, the participants agreed to name their group Saint Irenaeus Joint Orthodox Catholic Working Group. Saint Irenaeus appeared suitable as a spiritual patron of our group because he's a church father venerated in East and West, and his biography, coming from the East, from Asia Minor, and serving as a bishop in the West, in Lyons, is an example of the spiritual and intellectual links between the churches in East and West that we hope to promote through our work. The members of the Irenaeus group are not nominated by their churches, but are selected on the basis of their theological competence. New appointments, for example, after a member has withdrawn, are made by a vote of the entire group. The Irenaeus group is therefore not an official dialogue commission, but sees itself as an unofficial discussion group that meets for the purpose of promoting Catholic Orthodox dialogue at the international level. Since our foundation, the Catholic co-president has been Bishop Gerhard Feige of Magdeburg, who is both the chairman of the Commission for Ecumenical Affairs of the German Catholic Bishops' Conference and a member of the International Orthodox Catholic Commission. The Orthodox co-presidency has changed several times for various reasons. After Serbian Bishop Ignatij of Braničevo resigned in 2008, Metropolitan Johanna Yazigi of Western and Central Europe became our second Orthodox co-president. He had to give up this responsibility after only 3 years when he was elected the Patriarch of his church. Patriarch John was followed by Archbishop Job Getcha, who was already a member and became co-president after his episcopal ordination in November 2013. He had to resign 4 years later after being nominated co-chairman of the Joint International Commission. Therefore, we now already have our fourth Orthodox co-president, whose name you see on the list, Romanian Metropolitan Seraphim of Germany, Central and Northern Europe. Since 2004, the Irenaeus group has met annually for 5 days. When choosing sites for its meetings, the working group has always taken care to meet alternately in a Catholic or an Orthodox setting. And you see here the places where we have met. During our meetings, various papers shed light on the historical development of primacy and synodality, outlined the hermeneutical challenges of dealing with historical sources, and reflected on systematic considerations. It proved helpful for the discussion that each Orthodox presentation was followed by a Catholic response and vice versa. In addition, by means of studying the sources together, the members endeavored to grasp the precise meaning and intended message of the texts. For example, the definitions of the First Vatican Council. Furthermore, we adopted a method of discussing the papers in language groups, each of which summarized their insights in theses that were later submitted to the plenary for discussion. The points of consensus were then incorporated into a communiqué that summarized the results of each annual meeting. At its 10th meeting in Thessaloniki in November 2013, an initial summary of the results of the work over the first 10 years was presented, and the decision was taken to produce a common study on the relationship between primacy and synodality. In 2014, a drafting committee of 4 persons, 2 Catholics and 2 Orthodox, was appointed and entrusted with preparing a first draft of the common study. The drafting committee normally met twice a year, once in Rome and once in Paderborn, in order to identify gaps, distribute tasks, and incorporate additional theses. During its 15th annual meeting in Graz in October 2018, the Irenaeus group discussed the text for a last time and adopted it unanimously. You can see here the structure of the document, 5 chapters, an introduction and a conclusion, and 3 main chapters, the hermeneutical reflections, historical observations, and systematic considerations. Father Cyril will introduce the chapters on hermeneutical reflections and historical observations, and I will conclude with some comments to the chapter on systematic considerations. Before giving the floor to Father Cyril, I would like to mention that the common study has been published in several languages, up to now in 7 languages, in English, in German, in Italian, in French, in Russian, in Ukrainian, and even in Kiswahili. And there are still more translations in preparation, Arabic and Greek, Romanian and Serbian. So it will be a paper which will be available in more than 10 languages, and that already shows the great interest in the topic we deal with in our common study. The Irenaeus group continues its work. In 2019, in Trebinje, we decided to deal with the question of unity and schism, a topic which is very relevant, I think, for the situation in Ukraine as well. Unfortunately, we had no meeting in 2020 due to the pandemic, but we'll meet hopefully in 4 weeks again in Rome. That's my short introduction to the work of our group. Thank you.
Тараса, мікрофон.
Thank you very much, the Professor Johannes Eldeman, for your presentation. This group was created as non-official group, but still it gives more maybe academic freedom for participants. That's why your work is very thorough and in-depth elaboration of those topics you're taking. Now I'm giving floor to Professor Archimandrite Cyril Hoveron to present from his point of view the paper we are talking on today. Please, Father.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and congratulations to the Ukrainian Christian Association, right, УХАТ, and to the Ukrainian Catholic University for organizing this seminar. I think it is a part of a very important process of reception of the document and the very existence of multiple translations already at hand and the translations in future that are coming. It's an indication that the document is being received well by the churches, by different groups, theological groups, ecclesial groups, ecumenical groups. And indeed, we try to promote this document. All the members of St. Irenaeus group to promote among our own people and constituencies. I should mention that the Huffington Ecumenical Institute, which I chaired in Los Angeles, also contributed to publishing this document and the translations. We actually procured the Ukrainian translation as well. I'm posting on the chat a link to the Ukrainian translation so you could familiarize yourself with it at any moment. And I should also say that in my judgment, this is the most advanced and the most bold document that focuses on the issue, which is probably the most important in the Orthodox Catholic relations, the issue of primacy and synodality, how they relate to each other. I believe that this is probably the only serious issue that remains, that still divides us somehow. That's why it is very important that we address it. And probably St. Irenaeus has the best experts from both sides to discuss this issue. That's why I think we opted for the methods that we deem to be the most resultative, efficient to address the issue of synodality and primacy. We selected as an introduction to the study, the method of hermeneutics. I believe this was a very successful decision to start with hermeneutics, to approach the issue of primacy and synodality from hermeneutics. Well, in a sense, it is a very modern discipline, as we know, philosophical discipline. Hermeneutics emerged in the continental philosophy primarily as a philosophical method, which became popular among the theologians as well, and we apply this method. Well, I personally believe that hermeneutics is crucial for the ecumenical dialogues. And if we imagine that we had hermeneutics as a method, advanced method as we have it now, in the period of late antiquity or Middle Ages, when the schisms occurred, probably we would have to deal with much fewer schisms nowadays if hermeneutics were to be applied properly in the first place in the past. Because we understand that to a great extent, we understand it now, that to a great extent, many misunderstandings that eventually led to the splits in the church were happened because of the lack of hermeneutical approach to the terms, to the concepts that divided the church, but they could be avoided if interpreted in with the use of the hermeneutical method. That's why we apply the hermeneutical method as the key approach to the issue that we discussed in the document, and I think it was a very good decision, as I said. Also, I should emphasize another feature of this first part of the document that deals with the non-theological factors. Well, it's not a new thing, it's not a new idea that non-theological factors, particularly political and social factors, played sometimes more important role than theology did in the past, thus provoking schisms. So we were not the first who apply this idea to our study. But again, we try to emphasize the role of non-theological factors, and I believe they are indeed important. Well, I personally believe that in the past, non-theological factors were more important than theological factors. The only thing that the non-theological factors were camouflaged under the canopy of theological languages and discussions. People at the time, well, before the modernity, before secularity, did not have other expressive instruments to discuss, political or social issues, but theology. And sometimes their social and political disagreements addressed in theological discussions eventually led to the theological divisions and splits. That's why it is crucially important to take into consideration the non-theological factors, and I believe we as a group did this properly. Just one example how non-theological factors are important. If we take the current Byzantine Oriental theological dialogue between the Chalcedonian and non-Chalcedonian churches, which successfully completed in the early 90s, particularly with signing the document called the Chambézy document in 1990, which stated that the theological differences do not exist anymore between our two families, and nothing happened as a result. So we solved the theological issues, but other issues persist, like the issue of identity, cultural, social issues, and so forth. So let us imagine that the Orthodox and the Catholics have solved all their theological differences. What will happen next? I'm afraid nothing will happen next, because theology unfortunately does not play the same role it used to play. Quite surprisingly, those social divisions and political divisions that had been caused by theology now overwhelm theology. So the theological reasons are gone, but their social and political outcomes, identities, stay there and still divide us. That's why it is important, I believe, to address non-theological factors to successfully overcome the divisions. It's not just theology that matters. I do believe in theology. I believe in theology more than in anything else. But unfortunately, theology will not help, I believe, very unfortunately, to overcome our differences after we solve all the theological differences. And I think that we as a group addressed this issue in the first part of the document. Another feature that I'd like to emphasize in the first part is the call for the churches to be self-critical. This is really important because, well, in the era of confessionalism, we were critical about each other, but not about ourselves. And this did not help at all, as we understand. What really helps us is to be self-critical. And I think the theologians who represented the church, who represented different theological traditions, did a very good job in self-criticizing. What helped this self-critical approach is exactly the composition of the group, that people who participate in the group are not sent by the churches. They are not delegated by the churches. They represent the traditions, the Orthodox and the Catholic, but they, enjoy the academic freedoms. I cannot honestly imagine the degree of self-criticism that we exercise in St. Irenaeus group in the official dialogue, where people represent their churches and are supposed, to be defending the positions of their churches, not to be critical of their churches, but to be defending their churches. We distance somehow from our official structures, and we respect our traditions and the traditions of our partners, but we are free to exercise a healthy self-criticism, and I believe this helps our group a lot to advance in the studies like this one. This helped us to explore the second part of the document, which is the historical part, to critically and analytically study, explore the centuries, the evolution of the division. I would use this word, the evolution of the divisions in the church from the historical perspective. As you probably know, the official dialogue, Orthodox Catholic dialogue, had discussions, quite intensive discussions, whether to adopt the historical approach to their subject or to reject it. I believe that the standpoint of the co-chair, the previous co-chair of the Catholic Orthodox dialogue, Metropolitan John Zizioulas, was to avoid historical approach. He insisted on the systematic approach, which we also adopted in our group, but we decided to not to skip the historical approach, because we cannot solve the systematic problems without, without the excursions back to our past. Given especially that we have a number of very good historians in our group who are very competent to explore the historical underpinnings of the schisms and the division. So I believe the historical part is very strong. It has been composed on the consensus basis. Somehow we acknowledged our differences, even the differences in the interpretation of the histories, which was good, and which was in the spirit of this self-reflection and self-criticism. At the same time, we decided to somehow to look further beyond those differences, even beyond the different interpretations of the histories. So we try to be realistic about our past, not to to wear rosy spectacles in looking at our past. At the same time, we try to be positive and to acknowledge that the past needs to belong to the past. Somehow we need to go further. So that was the rationale behind our dealing with the evolution of the division, with the historical part. And the last point that I'd like to emphasize in this second part of the study, the historical part, is the interest and the focus on ecclesiology. I also personally believe that ecclesiology is really a key to resolve our differences, to resolve our divisions. The divisions are instigated, underpinned, sometimes, quite often, by ecclesiological perceptions. What is the church? How the church functions? And even if we take now the Orthodox, pan-Orthodox situation, we can observe a number of competing ecclesiologies in the Orthodox realm, and those competing ecclesiologies do not help us to, find a common denominator for our staying together, keeping relationships. That's why it is crucially important, and I think it was the point of this study, to arrive at a common ecclesiological denominator, to develop a kind of common idea about what is the church. And I think we have succeeded in this enterprise, and this will probably give a room to Johannes to speak more about the systematic approach in the document.
Thank you, Father Cyril, for your presentation, and you depicted somehow a pessimistic picture, I would say. We are concentrated upon the theological differences which we have to overcome, which is a very long way to do now, but you're saying that at the moment when the theological differences are once overcome, there are so many problems of non-theological character to be overcome. Okay.
It's better to be pessimistic now than when the time comes and we suddenly realize that we cannot be united on the theological ground. This is my personal kind of take on it.
Okay, thank you, Father. Now I'm returning the floor to Professor Johannes Erdemann to present more systematic part of this document, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to continue, and I can pick up what Father Cyril has said right now. Of course, if we would like to go on, we need a common basis on which we can reflect on the church and so on, also for the theological considerations. And I would like once again to share my screen to show you one of the central parts of the text. I won't read them, but I will just comment them a little bit. The task of reading is your task maybe after this conference. And I put in parallel columns the English text and the Ukrainian text, so that everybody is hopefully able to follow this presentation. So the main statements in the chapter about systematic considerations, we have usually common theses and then some paragraphs commenting these theses. And I would just like to shortly introduce the main theses of this chapter. The first is that koinonia and communia, the idea of communia, is a basis, for a common basis for our ecclesiology. Going back to the idea of the Eucharistic ecclesiology, which is essential for the relationship, the interrelationship between primacy and synodality as a structural principle of the church on the local, the regional, as well as on the universal levels. If we continue to the next point, then we are reflecting about the understanding of authority in the church, which should be always in the service of community, both when exercised on a primatial way and when exercised in a synodal way. So you have not only the primus, the protos, as an authority within the church, but also the synod as a collegial authority in the church. And both types of authority should be able to exercise authority following the example which Christ has given to us, and that means also the willingness to practice self-renunciation and to be in the service of the whole people of God. One of the important aspects which is a little bit explained in this chapter is the interrelationship between the primate, the synod, and the whole people of God. Because Christ is the head of the church and he's the source of all authority within the church, irrespective of whether this is exercised by one, by some, or by all. There is again an interrelationship of the whole pleroma of the church, so to say. Then there are following two chapters of theological interpretation, first of primacy, then of synodality. Concerning primacy, it's underlined that Christ is the sole head of the church, and he is the example for all those who exercise authority in the church. The patristic testimonies are crucial for the way in which authority should be exercised by the primate. The ecclesial status of primacy at the regional level is described in Apostolic Canon 34, a canon which is quoted also in the documents of the International Theological Commission. But what I think what we would like to underline here is that the Apostolic Canon 34 is not the key for the solution of all issues which are divisive between us. It's a canon in a certain context. It reflects the hopes and aspirations in the 4th century, and it's related to the regional level, but it's not applicable to the local church, and it's also not applicable to the universal level. This we should have in mind when discussing the importance of Apostolic Canon 34. Concerning the theological interpretation of synodality, Holy Scripture and church tradition bear witness to the fact that church governance is based on a synodal principle. And the bishops, that's important explanation, assembled in the synod, but have no warrant to go beyond the apostolic teaching, the depositum fidei, or the paradoris in Greek. Their task is essentially one of discernment, affirmation, and articulation, discerning the apostolic tradition on a certain topic, affirming that tradition, and proclaiming it. Coming to the last chapter in the systematic consideration, we tried to combine both approaches, the primatial approach and the synodal approach, because primacy and synodality should be serving communion. And we once again returned to the idea of an ecclesiology based on the Eucharist, which should be aware of the equality of origin and the complementarity of the primatial and synodal principles. And therefore, both from a theological point of view as well as from a canonical point of view, it is impossible either to address the issue of primacy without considering synodality, or to ignore primacy when dealing with synodality. And maybe one important point from the comments to this main thesis concerning the different developments in East and West. Church history reveals two ecclesiological trends, primarily but not exclusively synodal in the East, and primarily but not exclusively primatial in the West. But these should coexist in a creative tension, and any restoration of full communion between the Catholic and Orthodox churches will require on both sides strengthening of synodal structures and a renewed understanding of the universal primacy, both serving communion among the churches. And now you probably can imagine why the main title of our study is Serving Communion. Coming shortly to the key messages of the 5th chapter, the conclusion, I would like to underline the interplay between the presider and this assembly at the Eucharist, which provides the theological foundation for a renewed understanding of primacy and synodality in the Church, and the complementarity of these two principles, which is central to a deeper theological understanding of the Church that will facilitate Orthodox Catholic interpretation. All the still existing differences will require intensive further study with a rigorous hermeneutical approach to determine if they truly prevent the re-establishment of full communion, or if they are examples of legitimate diversity. And that means that we need a strengthening of synodal structures in the Catholic Church and an acceptance in the Orthodox Church of a certain primacy within communion, also at the universal level. And the last point, as the unity we seek in the 21st century has to deal with complete other circumstances, and then in the past it doesn't help to say we must go back to the patterns of the first millennium to find a common form of primacy and synodality in the third millennium, but we have to search for new forms, and the desire to cooperate and to work together in building bridges is important. And that's with these words I came back to what Father Cyril said. It's important that this takes place not only between academic theologians and bishops, but also among priests who care for the daily church life, as well as among all baptized who must find their proper voice as members of the body of Christ. And I think that's an important point we have made in this study. Primacy and synodality is not only about hierarchies, not only about the bishops and authority in the church, but it's also about the question of how to involve all baptized into rethinking the future of the church. And with these words, I would like to conclude my introduction into our study.
Thank you very much, dear Professor. It is interesting that your non-official commission and official mixed Catholic Orthodox commission are taking more or less the same topics to consider. And it will be extremely interesting for me to dedicate maybe one of our next sessions of Ukrainian Christian Academic Association to compare the outcome of your works. What do you have in common? In which points there is maybe some differences? For me, it would be interesting. And now we arrive to the point when we want to consider this work from different confessional traditions. Now I want to give the floor to Professor Serhiy Bortnik, which is lecturer in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Seminary and Academy, and also member of the International Affairs Commission for International Affairs of Ukrainian Orthodox Church, if I pronounce this rightfully. Oh, okay. Professor Serhiy Bortnik will give his presentation reaction in Ukrainian language. All the we should not switch our language. All those who are on English on the language channel will hear the English interpretation. All in Ukrainian we will hear the presentation of Professor Serhiy Bortnik in Ukrainian. Please.
Дякую. Мене чути? По-перше, я хотів би трошки уточнити, кого я представляю. Я представляю, перш за все, Київську духовну академію Української православної церкви. Я є там професором. І друге, це я є співробітником відділу зовнішніх церковних зв'язків Української православної церкви. Так це звучить українською мовою. Перекладач трошки творчо підійшов до моїх титулів. От. Я 2 роки назад написав рецензію на цю книгу, коли вона вийшла ще тільки німецькою мовою. От, я знаю багатьох членів цієї групи особисто, і мені було цікаво спостерігати за цією діяльністю. Я іноді питав, як і що. І коли я написав цю рецензію, підготував її, я виділив 4 пункти, які мені видались найбільш важливими в цьому документі, або як моя реакція на цей документ. І зараз я їх назву і трошки прокоментую. От, перший важливий момент, який я виділив в цьому документі, це визнання того, що принцип помісності національних церков негативно впливає на свідчення православної церкви про єдність. Оце безумовно так. Я, готуючись до сьогоднішньої зустрічі, спілкувався, зокрема, з пані Терезією Хайнталер, і з деякими іншими, тобто з представниками католицької спільноти і лютеранської спільноти. Дагмар Хеллер була лютеранкою. І якраз вони говорили про те, що цей національний фактор, який присутній і важливий для православних помісних церков, далеко не має такого значення для католицької спільноти і для лютеранської спільноти. І я думаю, що це той момент, який важливо розуміти, що коли ми говоримо про що ми віримо в єдину соборну апостольську церкву, от ми тут ще й соборну наголошуємо православні, а тим більше єдину, то оця єдність повинна все ж таки не затьмарюватися питаннями національного або державного будування, як це зараз відбувається в Україні, на мою думку. Тобто ця помісність часто може протирічити єдності, і це, безумовно, має різні аспекти. Тобто, фактично сьогодні в Україні те, що ми маємо, суперечки між 2 православними спільнотами, це боротьба за одну єдність проти іншої єдності, тобто за єдність національну всередині України, проти єдності в рамках Московського патріархату, можемо прямо сказати, але ця єдність має географічно значно ширші кордони, і тому оцей момент теж важливий. Другий момент, який я хотів би наголошував в рецензії, хотів би назвати зараз, це те, що євхаристійна еклезіологія, яка лежить в основі цього документу, ставить під сумнів етнічні та національні аспекти в житті і в діяльності церкви. От, знову-таки можна навести маленький приклад. Я недавно спілкувався з професором Карлом Христіаном Фельмі. Він дуже любить ідею євхаристійної еклезіології і вважає, що Євхаристія в центрі, ми сходимо в рамках літургії на небо, стаємо причасниками Божественного єства і так далі. От мені здається, що те, як воно бачиться теоретично, із німецької, зокрема, сторони, часом інакше бачиться з української сторони. От мені здається, що є тенденція або спокуса того, що євхаристійна еклезіологія фактично може вести до самозамикання церкви. Тобто, якщо ми говоримо, що наша спільнота самодостатня, ми вже і так не потребуємо якогось центру, і ми не потребуємо центру ні Фанару, наприклад, ні Москви, а ми самі самодостатні. Тобто виявляється ситуація, коли ми робимо себе обмеженими і не прагнемо до того, щоб вийти на більш широкий загал, для того, щоб цікавитись іншими життям інших церков і так далі. І другий аспект, коли ця євхаристійна еклезіологія, мені здається, може мати такі негативні наслідки, якраз фактично проти цього говорив Йоханнес. Він говорив про те, що треба залучати всіх охрещених, і в рамках євхаристійної еклезіології є очільник і зібрання. Насправді, мені здається, часто в практиці виникає ситуація, коли ми маємо тенденцію клерикалізації. Тобто, коли єпископ або священик є іконою Христа на літургії, це означає автоматично, що всі інші, хто не є в сані, вони якось менше варті в рамках літургії. Зокрема, часто незрозуміла цінність, наприклад, місіонерів або професорів богослов'я. І це якраз те, що мені здається особисто, звичайно, людині, яка не є кліриком в повному сенсі цього слова, що це є певна небезпека для того, щоб утверджувати євхаристійну еклезіологію, але не зважувати на якісь можливі негативні наслідки. Третій аспект, який я хотів би виділити, це підтвердження того, що необхідний баланс синодальності і примату. От мені здається, що це дуже важливо. Там говориться, зокрема, в документі, що католицька церква прагне і повинна зробити більший акцент на синодальності, а православна церква прагне і потребує більше примату. Я думаю, що це безумовно так. Наприклад, Критський собор це дуже чітко підкреслив, коли десятиліттями готувався цей собор, і потім він не відбувся в тому форматі, як це планувалося. І соборність без примату часто дійсно має небезпеки бути неповноцінною. І виявляється, що це якраз треба думати православно про примат, але з іншої сторони ми знову зараз бачимо, що коли одна сторона, зокрема Вселенський патріархат, зараз наголошує на певній формі примату, то це якраз не призводить до порозуміння. От я можу привести просто паралель. Папа Римський в католицькій церкві обирається кардиналами, які представляють церкви з усього світу. От, якщо ми говоримо, як обирається потенційний перший ієрарх православної церкви, тобто Вселенський патріарх, він не обирається всіма помісними церквами. Тобто є ситуація, коли оцей примат повинен, якого ми прагнуть деякі, зокрема, помісні церкви православні, повинен все ж таки доповнюватися синодальністю на рівні спілкування між різними помісними церквами, тобто, щоб була довіра до того першого ієрарха, який представляє всю православну церкву, як цього зараз часом немає, чого ми не бачимо. І четвертий момент, який я хотів би наголосити, який мені здається важливим в цьому документі, це теза про те, що просто повернення до моделі співіснування церков і до ідеї оцього балансу, примату і соборності, як це було в першому тисячолітті, не вирішує проблеми. Оце, мені здається, важливий момент, тому що в рамках офіційного діалогу православно-католицького ці ідеї озвучували, зокрема, представниками РПЦ, які вважали, що якщо ми просто повернемось до ситуації, як це було раніше, то це вирішить автоматично багато проблем, тобто, зокрема, папський примат не треба буде розвивати в тому, як він був сформульований на Першому Ватиканському соборі. Мені здається, що це спрощене бачення, і в 21 столітті, безумовно, ми не повинні повторювати просто як кальку ті моделі, які існували більше, ніж 1000 років тому. Оце 4 аспекти, які я хотів би наголосити, які мені здавалися важливими. От я зараз закінчу, можливо, потім будуть питання або ще якісь доповнення з моєї сторони. Дякую.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Sergei Bortnik, for a very interesting reaction. And now we would like to hear the reaction from Dr. Pavel Snitsnyuk, Director of the Institute of Ecumenical Studies. Please, I'm giving you the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Taras. I am grateful to Johannes and Father Cyril for joining us to present this document here today, to Sergei Bortnik for agreeing to respond, and to all the participants. Now, I would like to start with a little reaction to what Sergei Bortnik said, and then we'll go into my argument. So I was just like to add that the Pope, who is elected by the cardinals, is elected by the cardinals not just them representing different churches in the world, but also as representing the Church of Rome, the Roman diocese. Every cardinal has a church in Rome to which he is attached as a bishop or as a priest or as a deacon. And I think it's sort of like ecclesiological fiction, you know. It's like an Orthodox priest adding another smaller altar if he needs to celebrate another liturgy, a second liturgy on the same day. Yes, the fiction allows to safeguard an important principle, ecclesiological principle about only one liturgy at an altar, but the practice makes something different. So I think here as well, it's very important that Pope is elected by the cardinals who have every one of whom is attached to the Church of Rome. And it's almost a sign that it's the Diocese of Rome that is electing their own bishop and not the Church Universal, the Catholic Church that gathers there to elect the whatever, the head of the Catholic Church. But I leave this now, and I would go to the document. So I would like to do two things. First, develop a little bit this idea on which Father Cyril started commenting, that theology is also a product of non-theological factors. And I would like to focus on the influence of political factors and political ideas on theology, and especially on the way the church ministries and authority is being conceived. And secondly, I will come with some questions. So I don't know whether I'm supposed to be a respondent or discutant, but I have a series of questions which I would like to throw for discussion and conversation. So first, about the influence of political factors. I think that incredible importance of this document is by pointing out this hermeneutics. Yeah, the way we can read theology without having only one instrument to read it, theology itself. So we need history, we need political sciences, we need sociology, we need everything to be able to read those texts. So an important in a series of articles of this document by St. Irenaeus, there are mentions of influence of politics, political models on ecclesiology. And I think one could start this by asking this whatever Schmittian question of influence of one model on another model, theology and politics and vice versa, and ask ourselves, can politics be a locus theologicus for understanding theology and the authority in the church, or the way decisions are taken in the church? Now, Carl Schmitt claimed that all significant concepts of the modern theory of state are secularized theological concepts. Yes, so in a way he said that theology and law or civil law can be found on the same level. There was in a way a counter argument, yes, by people like Jan Assmann or Ernst Kantorowicz, who in a way insisted on circularity of theological and political elements. They said that theology borrows from politics just as politics borrows from theology. Yes, and Assmann did this by pointing out the Assyrian political material, if you want, which was used in the Old Testament to speak about God as one, as being jealous, the idea of covenant. Yeah, according to him, they all came in one or another way from the political domain. And then Kantorowicz more than more than 70 years ago, he showed this how in the Middle Ages the theology was under influence of political moderns and vice versa. Then, of course, you have Eric Patterson, who comes from a less historical, more theological criticism of Schmidt, and he says that the church makes a fundamental break with every political theology. Now, why I am making this long premise? Just to introduce a couple of articles of the document of St. Irenaeus, where I think this, reflexivity, influence of political ideas on theology is manifested. Yes, in number 5.4, it is said that at times models were imposed on the church by the state. A little bit later in 5.5, it is said that primatial and synodal forms have evolved over centuries. They will and should continue to change in order to adjust to new developments, such as globalization, geopolitical changes, and new political power structures, without conforming to the spirit of this world, end of quotation. So if the first point was to tell that politics influenced theology, the second point almost suggests that it's something that should be happening in the future, that ecclesiology, theology of the ministry can be influenced or can be conditioned by how society understands its own political structures or modes of organization. Point 7.8, it is said that the Second Ecumenical Council elevated Constantinople to the next place after Rome on political grounds. Yes, another moment when you say politics decides the diptychs. Point 9 says, in the 19th century, the emphasis on the concept of nation in the political sphere led certain Orthodox peoples to overemphasize the ethnic principle at the expense of the territorial one, thus favoring the formation of national churches, end quote. Here we are going to the to modernity, in which, as the document suggests, the idea of autocephaly of the Orthodox churches is in a way secularized or sacralized principle of national sovereignty. Again, yes, a principle which is often invoked by many Orthodox churches today, of like independence of every autocephalous church, seems to be in a way a sacralization of a political idea of nation state and its sovereignty. Number 10.6 speaks of the influence of political concepts on the dogmatic formulations of the Vatican I. Yes, and suggests that Vatican I can be read as a reaction to what is happening in the in the world of political philosophy, political theory of that time. Yes, the idea of sovereign, and on the other hand, as a response to what is happening on historically. And I will return to this point later on. And certainly one can add many other points. One can start with looking at the synods and the councils of the period of Saint Cyprian of Carthage, yes, and the procedure which they used, which is like almost copy-paste from the procedure of Roman Senate and other collegial structures of the classical world. And you have Afanasiev, who has worked on this. And you can use this principle to many other domains and decisions, dogmatical decisions of the church. Yet another point of the document on which I would like to focus more deeply, because it involves me as a Greek Catholic, as somebody who is belonging to the Eastern Catholic tradition, is the link between the idea of the Pope as an emperor, and of the Catholic Church as an empire. And this link is like mentioned en passant in the document in number 7.2, which says that Rome is important as a place of where Peter and Paul had taught, were martyred, and had their tombs, and it allowed Rome to, I quote, to establish an unparalleled prestige for the city from the start, without denying that the two apostles came there because it was the capital of the empire, end quote. Again, it's very, I think, a genial expression. It doesn't say that Rome became the number one see because of politics, but it says that Paul and Peter went there because it was the capital of the empire. Very, very nuanced, I think, and a genial expression in this sense. So let me remain a little bit on this idea of Rome as empire, and then I will conclude with a couple of questions. So Dominique Yonia-Prat, a French historian and philosopher of religion, says that empire, and I quote, is as it were a reference princeps of the Latin Church, end quote. So in a way, this universalism of the Bishop of Rome and his mission is connected to Roman imperialism. Rome, from being an urbs, in a way, becomes orbs. From a city becomes almost the universe in its totality. Yesterday, I returned from Budapest from International Eucharistic Congress, and the Mass, which will happen this Sunday, has been described as statio orbis, as playing with the words of statio urbis. So in a way, Pope celebrating the Eucharist is the only Eucharist which unites all the world. Peace be to Eucharistic ecclesiology. Now, a document which is which helps us to understand this imperial dimension of the medieval church and papacy is, of course, Donatio Costantini. Yes, and as Dan Mureșan has argued, the sense of this document is to define, justify, and delimit the meaning of the concept of Papa Universalis. And what we have here is, in a way, imitation of the empire, imitatio imperii, by the Church of Rome. It's a transferring imperial titles, insignia, property, glory from emperor to pope. Why I am speaking about this? Because the Oriental Catholic churches, in a way, got absorbed into this Roman being of empire by becoming parts of this big communion. For us, being with Rome became, in a sense, implied becoming Roman, because being Roman became, in a way, a note of the church. Hence, you have Latinization or Romanization. Pope Benedict XVI got rid of the title of the Patriarch of the West, yes, which could have perhaps helped Orientals to find their own place in the Catholic communion. And in a way, with disappearance of the title, the primacy of Rome within the Diocese of Rome, within the Roman Patriarchate, and within the Church Universal becomes a primacy of its own. Yes, the primacy of Pope as the Patriarch in the West is being projected on all the other churches, and it perhaps explains one of the reluctances of the Orthodox to accept this exercise of primacy. So one of the possible things to reflect when we speak about primacy, synodality, is to see whether we can, I don't know, also find ways of delimiting the Pope's authorities and his primacy at different levels. Within the Diocese of Rome, where he is a primate, within Italy, where he is metropolitan, within the West, where he is a patriarch, and his service to the communion of all the churches. Now, I will not stop on the on other issues. I would just jump to the conclusions, or rather to engage with some other elements. So my first point has to do with canons and canonicity. Yes, I find very beautiful this reflection about the role of the canons and what authority we give to the canons today. Now, in Ukraine, as you know, there has been a whole debate about the canonicity. Yes, Ukrainian Orthodox Church has accused Kiev Patriarchate and the newly created Orthodox Church of Ukraine of being non-canonical. Yes, but it would seem that it is impossible to be canonical, yeah, if we keep the canons as they exist. So every church would be uncanonical according to this criterion. Yes, the documents, the document of St. Irenaeus group mentions the canon 15, I think, of Nicaea, which forbids to move one bishop from one see to another. Yes, and it's not being respected in any church. Yes, I don't know, Metropolitan Onufri was transferred to Kiev from Chernivtsi. Patriarch Bartholomew was transferred to Rome, to the new Rome, Constantinople, from the diocese he was before. Patriarch Kirill was transferred from Smolensk. So all of them would be uncanonical if you want to keep the canons, yes, ad literam. So the question, I think, and it's more to the Orthodox members of the group and to the Orthodox theologians, is how do you deal with this situation? How do you play with canons or use canons? It's important because, for example, in Ukraine, yes, you have the question of the possibility, and not only in Ukraine, the question of the possibility of a joint prayers. Yes, and you have one church that says the canons forbid to pray with, for the Orthodox to pray with the Catholics. Other Orthodox churches say, no, it's not forbidden. Yes, Constantinople prays with the Catholics. Moscow, at least at this stage, avoids praying with the Orthodox. So how do you interpret canons, and how this hermeneutics can help us to interpret canons? Now, number two. Vatican I and the dogmas of Vatican I about papal primacy and infallibility. Being conscious of this, of how history has led us to this decision, can we perhaps imagine a more flexible way of exercising authority of a primate? If historicity and social cultural embedding of concepts, that's a quotation from number 1 of the document of St. Irenaeus, if they remain a permanent challenge to theology, can we really imagine that there is only one way of being synodal or of being exercising primacy, can we not say, okay, this is flexible? What is in this historical moment, what is for today the best way to exercise primacy and synodality? Of course, rooted in tradition, but having today as a question mark, because so it was done in any previous period. Yeah, so it was done over Vatican I, so it was done during the first millennia, etc. About the Vatican I, can we not see the dogmas of the Vatican I as, in a way, a state of exception, rules for the state of exception? Yes, we know that this was a moment of when Italy was being united, when Rome was afraid that it will lose the possibility to convoke other synods and perhaps even conclaves. So they needed to assure a way of decision making in exceptional, if you want, apocalyptic situation. Yes, when you read the correspondence of Vatican Curia before yes, the end of 19th century, you see that they were looking for places where in Austria or in Germany or in Spain where to conduct a conclave, because they were not sure that they can elect a pope after Garibaldians will occupy Rome. So can we look at this as a rule for the state of exception, which is valid, but only in the state of exception? If we can have a parallel, maybe a parallel in the Orthodox Church is this, what Patriarch Tikhon has done when he's seen that it will be impossible to gather a synod to elect his successor. So what he do? He appointed 3 locum tenenses, места блюстителей, who would be in charge of the church. You could say it's a completely uncanonical act. At the same time, it was a state of exception, something you do because you are in such a dear position. So can we look at this case as the Vatican II dogmas as a state of exception, and can we read it in this way? And my last point is how far can you go with hermeneutics? How far can you go with bringing history, sociology on board when interpreting canons? Will this apply only to the questions concerning church authority? Would this apply to other dogmatical questions of Christology, Trinity, sacramentology, etc.? So where is the criterion, yes, if you want, between what is divine and what is human in our theological and dogmatical propositions? So thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulo. And now I would like to open the discussion. I guess that both two speakers and two reactions were extremely interesting, and has arisen many questions. I would like to ask you to raise your hand. I already see one, and then I'll give you the floor to make a question. Okay, Олександр Жабенко.
Так, можна казати, так?
Так.
Добре. Власне, в мене кілька думок виникло, по ходу я слухав, тобто старався бути уважним. Можливо, кілька, 2 чи 3, я би так висловлюю. Стосовно стосунків богослів'я і політики, тут згадувалося кілька разів різними учасниками. Тут така думка, перше, що слова Христа згадується, що чим серце наповнене, те говорять вуста. Тобто можна так міркувати, що і політика, і богослів'я, вони походять з єдиного джерела, насправді, з нашого серця. Якщо так переінтерпретувати, а проявляється як вуста. Тобто те, що людина діє, як вона говорить, як вона діє, і як в іншому місці Господь каже, також походять із серця. Тобто, можливо, тут вся справа в тому, що насправді немає потрібно шукати оце серце, якщо вже так про це говорити, для того, щоб досягнути єдності, для того, щоб було все, чого бажають християни насправді, то потрібно оце серце, тобто не богослів'я і не політика є серцем, але вони якби походять від нього. Тобто потрібно шукати цю суттєву сторону, від якої вони виходять. І ще інша думка Максима Сповідника, коли він досліджує питання природної волі. Вона покладена в основу 6-го Вселенського собору, ці дослідження, не тільки його. Він такої думки доходить, що ключове розрізнення, наприклад, між волею людей і тварин. Чим відрізняється, що тварини керуються природою, а людина здатна більше керувати природою, тобто має свободу. І тут важливо, що інша думка те, що можна так міркувати, хоча Максим так не каже, але я так дійшов такого висновку, напевне, що людина має настільки велику свободу, бо що вона стає розумною, і вона настільки розумна, що стає вільною, свободною. Тобто ці речі взаємопов'язані, знову ж таки, політика і богослів'я можуть бути, скоріше всього, якби в ідеалі, вони повинні бути переходити в одне в одне. Тобто в ідеалі ми маємо бачити як зразок, насправді, коли і богослів'я, і політика – це одне й те ж. Тобто, насправді, вони походять як в досконалості, як насправді від Бога, і в такому смислі вони, як дар Духа Святого, дар Божий, насправді вони від одного Бога, насправді від єдиного Духа, як можна про дари судити. І таке інше міркування говорить про те, що, як би це сказати, що богослів'я у вершинах своїх стає насправді політикою, а політика в своїх вершинах стає богослів'ям. Тобто ці речі насправді походять з єдиного цього джерела, про яке можна казати. Це перша думка така, а друге, ще я хотів додати трошки про, можливо, деякі нерозуміння певне, тобто коли зустрічаються якісь концепції в богослів'ї, так що які не так просто зрозуміти. Насправді, часто може бути доречним гарне порівняння. Наприклад, в Євангелії ми маємо кілька таких порівнянь. Наприклад, Господь порівнює людей з травою, наприклад. І при цьому він щось суттєве підкреслює, і це дозволяє їм побачити якісь важливі речі. Тобто виділити оце суттєве. І оця неподібність є певна. Тобто ми, коли богослів'я, взагалі воно не говорить найменш непідходящими словами, як відомо, такий апофатичний вислів. Тобто щось, що насправді не подібне до того, що воно описує, особливо в тринітології, наприклад, христології, тобто такі найбільш високі якісь теми, сакраментології.
Пане Олександре, я би просив вас перейти до суті питань.
Ми можемо шукати гарні порівняння. Наприклад, є таке порівняння, що можна порівнювати лідерство певною мірою, першість, із складами наголошеними, ненаголошеними, взагалі з текстами, з певними віршами навіть. Тобто ми можемо уявити, що в якийсь момент, принаймні, або ситуативно, або це суттєво, що є певні наголошені склади, і є, напевне, менш наголошені, так? Тобто шукати певні аналогії, і вони дозволяють нам зрозуміти те, що ми не можемо безпосередньо розуміти отак теоретично, можливо, так. Добре,
пане Олександре.
Дякую.
Now I see the right hand by that's Михайло Шелудько. So I'll give you the please.
Is it okay if I'll ask the questions in Ukrainian, because my questions is for пан Сергій Бортник. Питання до пана Сергія. Ви згадали такий момент, який багато хто згадує з інших православних богословів, але я не знаю, наскільки ця думка поширена. Тобто ви сказали, що примат Вселенського патріархату в православ'ї буде легше сприйняти, якби Вселенського патріарха обирали представники всіх помісних церков. Тобто питання до вас, наскільки ця думка є поширеною в середовищі богословів Російської православної церкви, і чи дійсно в такому випадку цей примат могли би визнати як подібний до примата римського папи в католицькій церкві? Дякую.
Чути мене, да?
Так чути.
Я говорив про цей принцип, зокрема, в контексті помісності православних церков загалом, і саме на етнічному і національному принципі, чого немає в католицькій церкві загалом. Ця думка, я її зустрічав, зокрема, приблизно 100-120 років назад. Вони обговорювалися в контексті помісного собору або там війни, Першої світової війни, коли були думки про те, що війська Російської імперії займуть місто Константинополь. Тобто такі думки були. Але загалом, тобто, я не до кінця зрозумів, тобто, що мав на увазі Павло Смацнюк. Тобто я вважаю, що кардинали все ж таки представляють перш за все свої країни, де вони проживають і де вони служать єпископами. Тобто є умови на сьогоднішній момент, наприклад, претендент на патріаршество в Константинопольському патріархаті може зобов'язаний бути громадянином Туреччини. Да? Також мало відомо там патріархів не грекомовних. Да? Тобто є ряд критеріїв, які не є універсальними для всього православного світу. Тобто це вже я сам додаю те, що я не читав, зокрема. Тобто питання рецепції, воно дуже важливе. Да? Тобто зараз ми бачимо кризу рецепції, да? Тобто, ну, там у нас багато криз, да? Але якщо я зі сторони РПЦ кажу, да, або РПЦ в Україні, да, як часто нас називають, то я якраз бачу, ну, підкреслюю зараз ті слабкості, які є в позиції протилежної сторони, в конкуруючій сторони. Тобто, як це можна визнати? Тобто, насправді це з пропозиції подумати, як це примирити ці дві позиції, да? Тобто, чи повинен патріарх Вселенський обов'язково бути греком турецького походження, або, як це називається, турком грецького походження, да? От, тобто, мені здається, що оця католицька церква знайшла більші принципи універсальності, ніж вони є сьогодні в православних церквах, в православній церкві загалом на світовому рівні. Оце те, що я думаю. Дякую.
Does anyone have some questions? Because I'd like to develop this topic. Again, the question for Serhiy Bortnik. In your proposition, I see the some rational moments, but is it opportune to develop a so-called Orthodox church system in parallel with the Catholic church system, imitating it, building sort of Orthodox world and looking for the Primate, which is sort of new for the Orthodox Church, or maybe it would be. I remember your remark that it's not good to take the schemes of the old church institutions and to apply them to the new situation, but maybe in some future views it will be possible to return back to the Roman bishop as the one primate of the whole church.
Дякую за питання. Ну, я зараз в своєму виступі виходив перш за все з тексту документу, як я його зрозумів, що найбільш важливо для мене було. І, зокрема, я ще раз підкреслю, що є одна з тез, те, що православні потребують більшого присутності примату, і католики більшої синодальності. Це не моя думка в даному випадку, а це те, що я побачив і підкреслив в самому документі. Тобто я вважаю, що не обов'язково це вводити, посилювати примат в православ'ї, тому що так є у католиків. Я вважаю, що це ми потребуємо, тому що пробуксовує соборність в православній церкві. От, тобто, знову-таки, Київський собор, я його просто кілька разів аналізував, тому що був на різних заходах, і мене просили якось виступити, зокрема в Німеччині. От там я дуже чітко пам'ятаю, я це довів, ну, я перевів ряд аргументів, а потім це підтвердили співробітники Московського відділу зовнішніх церковних зв'язків. Ну, це вже років через 2 вони підтвердили. Ну, тобто один з них в приватній зустрічі, я його запитав, він підтвердив. Тобто ситуація в тому, що внутрішня політика церковна виявляється важливіша за це православну єдність. Тобто, якщо конкретно про 2016 рік, то виявляється, що конкретно для патріарха Кирила було важливіше зустрітися з папою Франциском, а це було продовженням політики світської, да, там Російська Федерація мала свої інтереси, і в кінці кінців РПЦ відмовляється від участі у Всеправославному соборі на Криті, тому що після зустрічі з папою це було б занадто багато екомунізму для Росії за 1 рік. Та, тобто, отака от мотивація, це дійсно, я сам так прийшов до того, що вони боялись своїх консервативно налаштованих вірян, от, а потім це було підтверджено. Тобто, я вважаю, що в даній ситуації, тобто, як відомо, наприклад, митрополит Іларіон Офієв, зокрема, говорить не раз про те, що православна церква світу є конфедерацією незалежних помісних церков. Тобто, я вважаю, що богословське це все ж таки, ну, не повноцінне твердження, неправильне твердження. Да? Тобто ми повинні проявляти свою єдність більше. Але з іншої сторони, треба відповідно подумати, що ж повинна зробити інша сторона, да? Зокрема зараз Вселенський патріархат, щоб інші помісні церкви погодились на утвердження і збільшення повноважень Вселенського патріарха. Тобто, коли це, як робиться в ситуації з ПЦУ в Україні, це було все ж таки зроблено авторитарно, з нашої точки зору. Да? Тобто, патріарх Вселенський захотів і зробив. І відповідно ми маємо зараз величезний конфлікт, який на десятиліття, можливо, розтягнеться і так далі. Тобто, в принципі, в мене позиція діалогічна, я вважаю, що треба шукати примирення, да, зближення, але якраз так, щоб це було не одностороннє, а з обох сторін, якщо говорити про 2 сторони, або багатосторонньо, якщо ми говоримо реально про сім'ю помісних православних церков, як це є в Східній Європі, зокрема. Дякую.
Thank you very much. Now I see the raised hand part of Dr. Konstantin Siegel. Please, I'm giving the floor.
Щиро дякую, дорогі колеги. У мене є таке відчуття, що в цьому зумі ми не вирішимо питання примату церков, тому я хотів би зосередитись на більш конструктивному завданні, а саме рецепції напрацювань групи святого Іринея, про які нам чудово доповідав професор Йоханнес Ольдеман, і, зокрема, в нашій країні, в Україні. Так? Оці паралельні цитати, які наводив професор Ольдеман, вони свідчать про те, що, відповідно, там є надзвичайно актуальні для нас дуже важливі речі. Хотів, в чаті я нагадав, що 2 роки тому на Успенських читаннях професор Ольдеман в Києві робив блискучу доповідь. Назва її була взята з 133-го псалма. Як добре, як любо, коли брати живуть у купі. І мені здається, що дуже актуальним є цей семінар УХАТ, тому що він саме сприяє тому, що відбулася належна рецепція групи святого Іринея, її напрацювань, її текстів у нас. Тим більше, що конкретно оця книга про служіння сопричастю, яка українською мовою вийшла в видавництві «Дух і літера» і є в відкритому доступі в інтернеті, вона є багатьма іншими європейськими мовами, німецькою, англійською, італійською, французькою і так далі. Тобто є спільне поле між Україною і названими країнами. Тобто мені здається, що щойно Йоханнес запропонував дуже короткі кілька цитат, але реально було б дуже доцільно повернутись до них і розглянути їх більш детально, і може на наступному етапі привернути до цього більшу увагу. Ну, от, зокрема, в останній цитаті Йоханнес, ти казав, між іншим, це означає, що імперські і феодальні моделі минулого більше не можуть мати місце. Це дуже конструктивна теза, опублікована всіма зазначеними мовами, але ми бачимо, зокрема в Білорусі зараз, саме чітке повернення імперських і феодальних моделей і по відношенню до клириків, і по відношенню до мирян, і до суспільства. І отже, це означає, це тільки один я конкретний приклад навів, а цей текст available, так, всіма мовами, включно з нашою рідною. Тому мені здається, що, по-перше, дуже, і в цьому я вбачаю велику актуальність цієї нашої зустрічі, і дякую вашому інституту і всім нашим колегам УХАТ, що відбувається така подія, і подумати про те, в який спосіб ми можемо сприяти більшій, глибшій рецепції цієї групи, тому що, ну, будьмо чесними, вона є абсолютно унікальною зараз на нашій планеті. Так, відбулася криза багатьох різних екуменічних центрів, груп і так далі. І зараз саме ця група пропонує, ну, дуже цікаву модель. Про це добре зараз говорив отець Кирил, що представники не є представляють свої церкви, тобто вони вільніші, водночас це реально сильні експерти, голоси, які варто чути. От, тому у мене перше запитання до всіх тут присутніх, як і в який спосіб далі ми можемо конструктивно поширювати і цю модель, і цю реально діалогічну форму спілкування, яку розвивають католики і православні в цій групі, і це вже триває, ми бачимо, 17-й рік. От, питання до професора Ольдемана. Як би ти прокоментував цю ситуацію з поверненням імперських феодальних моделей, які не тільки в минулому, да, не тільки в архаїці, а які прямо зараз нам заважають ширше і більше співпрацювати і робити цікаві речі разом? І друге, яким ти бачиш майбутнє розвиток вашої групи, які, я сказав би, позитивні фактори можуть сприяти вашій роботі, тому що про негативні факти ми чимало знаємо. Дякую. Many thanks, danke schön.
Thank you, dear Konstantin. If I may answer.
Yes, you're welcome.
To your question, and also thank you very much for the comments which were made by Sergei Bortnik and Pavlo Smitsnyuk to our study. I think you mentioned important points, and we are far from thinking that our study is the solution of all questions, but it's just an input to go on with reflections, and therefore it's very important. Also, as Konstantin said, to discuss further what is mentioned in the study, and maybe especially in the Ukrainian context. Indeed, what we have done might be, so to say, a model of communication, ecumenical communication, and that the example of our group shows that you just need a certain level of trust in between the people. You won't go forward in ecumenism with just organizing one conference and another conference with different people taking part and so on, but you need the confidence in a, so to say, closed group that you can really tackle the difficult issues. And therefore we have need well, 15 years until the publication of our first common study. It would not have been possible after 5 years to make such conclusions, and you just need time for reflection. And of course, the situation and the context is changing. I would agree with Konstantin that in the last, let's say, 5 years, we see an increasing impact of, so to say, imperial thinking again. which was not the case in the years before. But the old patterns are coming up again, and of course we have to deal with them. But I would insist that they are no patterns for the future. We have to find other patterns in the society and in the world of the 21st century. The imperial pattern was working in a time in the Middle Ages or in the ancient church when you had, well, so to say, quite closed societies. But now we have open societies. We know what is going on in Ukraine from Germany. We know what is going on in the United States. We know what is going on in Afghanistan, and so on. We have, well, simultaneous developments, but a big non-simultaneity, I would say, in dealing with that. And that's a big problem, that we have the different patterns, the old patterns from the ancient church. And we have some patterns which were developed in the Catholic Church during the Middle Ages until the 19th century, I would say, with an important role on the bishops of Rome. We have other patterns in the Orthodox churches, the ethnic principle, the national churches you mentioned, which came up, well, let's say in the 19th century. That's not a model of the ancient church, the current model in the Orthodox churches. But we have to deal with these different approaches to church organization, and we have to, well, openly see what are the weaknesses of our own patterns and what are the strengths of other patterns. And coming back to the question of primacy on different levels, I would argue that, well, we have a strong primacy within Orthodoxy, looking at the position of the ecumenical patriarch, but also looking to the position of the Russian patriarch or the patriarch in Romania. They have all a tendency to centralize everything in Constantinople or in Moscow or in Bucharest. But this is a kind of primacy, well, so to say, on the regional level, not on the universal level, for a certain part of the church. And we have no such forms of primacy within the Catholic Church. We have just the primacy of the Pope on the universal level. And we have also a strong position of the local bishop on the local level. But we are lacking a certain form of primacy on the regional level, at least in the Roman Catholic Church. We could say that in the Eastern Catholic churches, we have such a format. But that is an example for me that we can much learn from each other how to deal with that. And at the moment we are I think on a good way of developing new forms, new patterns of synodality in the Catholic Church. You know that the Catholic Church is preparing for a Synod of Bishops in 2023, where the synodality in the life of the Church should be discussed, and that there will be a broad process of discussion starting now at the diocesan level, of the level of the local church, and going on to the national and continental levels and so on. And I hope very much that this process will help us to invent the importance of synodality for the Catholic Church. So still things are going on. We have to look for the patterns from the past, but they are not the patterns for the future, but they have to be transformed to the new contexts we have in the 21st century. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and we wish to you and your group real strength and good inspiration.
Thank you very much. One small remark from my part. in the field of popularization of this great work of St. Irene group, it will be dedication at least one lecture, or as it is already doing now by Paulos Mitsnyuk. He's dedicating one seminar lecture in the seminary and in Ukuvo for the students to read this document and to discuss it. In this way, we will make acquainted our young ministers with the document and with the good examples shown there in this document. Now I see the right hand by Father Dr. Iov Shaban. Please. You are free to your question.
Доброго дня, мене чути?
Так.
Вітаю всіх сьогоднішніх учасників. Справді щиро дякую групі Іринея за чудовий документ. Я його перечитав кілька разів, він мені надзвичайно сподобався, якісний і гарна робота. У мене тільки виникає питання такі про майбутнє, яке ви бачите в групі Іринея, бо я почув, що краще бути в замкнутій системі, щоб можна було щиро обговорювати болючі питання. Чи не здається вам, тут отець Кирил і Йоганнес, які є представниками групи, чи не здається вам, що в закритій такій своїй системі ви опиняєтеся в так званій теплій ванні, де ви, скажімо, не допускаючи інших думок, починаєте говорити про речі, які стосуються також і інших, скажімо, церков, чи питань, чи конфесій. Я не хочу сказати, що немає греко-католиків в вашій групі, тому це мене, скажімо, якось турбує. Зовсім ні, але мені здається, що питання уніатизму вже давно обговорюється, питання Томосу в Україні, нової Української православної церкви, це все ви зараз сьогодні згадували. Але мені здається, що ані греко-католиків справді, ані Української православної церкви богословів у вас немає. Чи не є це старою приказкою, яку завжди там хтось говорить, говоримо про вас без вас? Чи плануєте ви все ж таки трошечки привідкрити свою групу і залучити деяких богословів, експертів, цікавих людей, які би представили свою точку зору, оскільки питання і греко-католицьких церков, яке тісно пов'язане з питанням примату і синодальності в церкві, їх розуміння, подібно як і питання надавання томосів, яке до сьогодні не вирішене. Чи потрібно почути також голос інших, на вашу думку? Ну і також в мене ще є інше запитання, друге. Ми багато говоримо про моделі єдності. Я особисто на сьогоднішній день не знаю жодної моделі, яка би була ефективною і прийнялася усіма конфесіями, ну, принаймні традиційними, католицькою і православною. Може, хтось з вас знає краще якісь відповіді, то я дуже радо почув.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I'll give a word to Cyril Hobrun and then to Johannes.
Перепрошую, я спробую українською відповісти. Я перепрошую, відлучався на іншу сесію паралельно з Норвегією. Зараз повернувся. Я, мабуть, з другого питання почну відповідати про моделі єдності. Поки що всі моделі єдності залишаються моделями, тому що в жодному випадку внаслідок екумінічних діалогів жодного разу єдності ще не було досягнуто. І тому ми говоримо лише про теоретичні моделі до цього часу. Єдина реальна модель, яка працювала в минулому, це уніаційна модель унії. Вона реально працювала, але ми ж погодилися, що ми начебто до неї не повертаємося. Про перше питання, що я не оцінюю зараз, вона погана чи добре, просто вона реально працювала в минулому. Зараз жодної моделі іншої, поки що, яка б працювала, не існує. Щодо питання про теплу ванну, ми більше навіть не в ванні, а в римських термах, дуже теплих і затишних знаходимося, і там дуже добре. От. І, можливо, це не так погано, тому що мають бути такі інкубатори богословської думки, де людям затишно разом зустрічатися і обговорювати вільно проблеми, які вони не можуть обговорити в інших бульбашках. Тому що, власне, ієрархія – це є окрема бульбашка, якісь братства – це окремі бульбашки, богослови – це бульбашки. От. І я думаю, що ми навмисне, я думаю, питання до Йоганнеса буде, чи варто, чи є сенс, я вважаю, що є сенс запрошувати наших греко-католицьких братів до наших дискусій, безумовно. Тому що в нас критерій не церковний, не еклезійний, а богословський. Якщо є, я знаю, що є дуже талановиті богослови серед греко-католиків, яких можна було б залучати, то це варто було б зробити. Але питання унії, на мою думку, ми не обговорюємо навмисне через те, що, на мою думку, такого питання не існує в православно-католицьких стосунках. Це питання штучно піднімається весь час тими, хто хоче торпедувати діалог, і вони створюють штучні перепони у цьому діалозі. Я думаю, що питання унії – це є штучна перепона. Питання вирішене, все. І ми все про це сказали і в Баламанді, і нам просто треба йти далі, жити разом і не повертатися до цього. На мою думку, це непродуктивно буде знову і знову її обговорювати, просто через те, що це буде гальмувати цей процес, і навіщо говорити про те, про що вже все сказано, про що ми дійшли згоди. От така буде моя відповідь, якщо дозволите.
Now,
Thank you. I would like to pick up the question of Father Ihor as well. Yes, of course, we are open for Greek Catholics as members as well. But as I explained, the group, well, the renewal of the group is quite a long time process. So we usually invite new members only when one member is leaving, because we have now already 26 members, and if the groups become still bigger, 30 or more persons, that's just difficult for organizing an in-depth discussion. So to say, unfortunately, the Catholic members in the recent years were quite stable. We have several changes within the Orthodox membership, but very few in Catholic membership. And the last time when a Catholic member left the group, we elected a new member, an Eastern Catholic, a Maronite, not a Greek Catholic, but a Maronite. So the group is aware to include representatives of the Eastern Catholic churches. That is a necessity. And I'm convinced that the next time we have to elect new Catholic members, there will be probably be Greek Catholic members as well. And well, another problem I should mention, we have no women as members up to now. That's also a problem, so to say. We have not the female experience within our group, and we should include that as well. So that's another issue we have to deal with. And well, we'll see how the group decides what is important. The whole group decides. The Catholic members can make a proposal who should be a new Catholic member, but the decision is taken by the whole group. That means not only the Catholics, but also the Orthodox should agree that he or she will become a new member of the group, because we have the principle of consent concerning that. That's right, just for explaining the situation how it is at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Since I don't see any more questions, so
If I can ask a question.
Yes, sure, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to ask maybe both Father Cyril and Johannes. We did a lot of work on synodality, yes, over past decades. Yeah, conferences, symposia, books published, thesis defended, etc. Do you see within the Orthodox Church, within the Catholic Church, a lot of fruit of this work? Yes, the synods of bishops, yes, is the thing has been initiated by the Vatican II. So 70 years ago, the Pan-Orthodox Council, yes, has been discussed maybe even for a longer period. Do you see signs of optimism? Do you see that churches are becoming more synodal after all this research and work that is being done? Thank you.
If I may answer to this question, I think this is an excellent one. And I don't believe that all those discussions on synodality, on sobornistю, have much increased the real synodality within the Orthodox churches. What happened, though, is that those discussions have spotlighted, like indicated, like revealed, if you want, that we don't have real synodality in the life of the churches, that to a great extent it's a nice theological concept and a theological bluff to a great extent. Just imagine the Catholic Church, which we accuse of lack of synodality, managed to have 2 councils, ecumenical councils, within the last 200 years. We didn't manage even a single one to have, with all our theology of synodality. Though that's why I believe that, well, the discussions on synodality, they are fruitful not in the sense that they increase the real synodality, but that they indicate the real problems that we face. And that is a good outcome. Maybe not necessarily what we expected, but still good.
Okay, should I continue? Okay, thank you. Well, from my point of view, I would say we can already see the seeds which were put into the earth concerning synodality. We don't see yet the fruits, maybe, but the seeds are we can see in the different, well, conferences, theses, and so on. And also in the practice, I would say, if you look back to the recent Synod of Bishops within the Catholic Church on family issues and so on, they started always with a survey between the faithful, not only the bishops gathering in Rome and discussing some papers and so on. And really in the pontificate of Pope Francis, I think we see more well, engagement in synodal structures within the Catholic Church. It's not yet perfect. We see only the seeds, as I said, and maybe we see also some weeds is in English, I think the word. So the positive and the negative factors, and that has to develop, and this needs a process. And as Father Kirill mentioned, of course, there may be also misuse of synodal structures and so on. We have to be aware of all of this, but I think we have to go forward with this, and we have to have in mind that, well, every synod also needs a primate, a protos. That is also an important point we underlined in our structure. Synod is not, well, like political democracy. It's a little bit other type of deliberating the future of the church. And again, this is the point where we can learn from each other, the Catholics from the Orthodox and vice versa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Using my authority, I see the right hand of Konstantin Sigo and Adalberto Mainardi. I'd like to continue the question of Pavlos Nesnyuk to both our speakers. Are there visible any signs of discussion among Orthodox theologians in the Orthodox academic sphere, the question of universal authority, universal primacy for the Catholic Church, for the Orthodox churches? Okay, please.
Well, for sure, there are discussions. We had quite strong discussions after the document of Ravenna, where the Russians were not took not part, and then we had a paper from Moscow on primacy on the universal level, which was very heavily discussed in a paper from Constantinople, written by Metropolitan Elpidophoros, about primacy on the universal level. So we have a very strong discussion, I would say. We have a very good collection which came out in America. I don't know the editors now, on primacy and synodality in the Orthodox Church, with very worth reading contributions from several theologians. So I think there is really a process of discussing, reflecting on it, maybe started by the disputed document of Ravenna, and so to say it was a good input for such a discussion. And well, I would say we have a new discussion after the Council of Crete, and what happened there or what didn't happen there, about the role of the ecumenical patriarchate, about the role of a pan-Orthodox council or synod, and so on. So I think there is very much going on within the Orthodox academic world, at least. But up to now, I see, well, no conclusions, no direction of this discussion.
Thank you very much. Now I'm giving floor to Konstantin Sigo, and then will be Adalberto Mainardi.
Yes, just towards that, we have a privilege today to see among us Brother Adalberto Mainardi, member of St. Irenaeus group, so it will be important to hear the voice from Italy. Thank you.
Please.
Yes, I would like to thank the organizer of these meetings and all the speakers and many friends among them. I would like to have a remark which has already been done, that is the importance of dialogue. Dialogue among the members of St. Irenaeus group that allowed us to have a more free approach to the questions. But I think that the dialogue is also a very important method and a question of life inside each church. So we have primacy, synodality, but neither primacy nor synodality function without a dialogue, not only between Protestants and Catholics or Orthodox and Catholics, but within the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church.